This is Andi Purewal, Boxing Social in association with Betfred. I'm joined by Matthew Macklin over Zoom. Matt, firstly, how are you?
I'm not too bad. Yourself?
I'm all good. Obviously, the weekend is nearly here. It's Friday. It's midday, so we've got a lot. Well, got a quiet one for a change, Matt. No boxing here in the UK. What are you gonna do to kind of take up your time? Nothing to watch.
I don't know what I'll do with myself. We've lost without the boxing. No, I'll enjoy a quiet weekend and just try and chill out, get some rest.
Well, I'm sure you will do. And obviously, we've got a busy week next week. Obviously, got 3 shows, but one you'll be on with the Sky one with the Boxer tournament. But just before we come on to kind of what's coming up, let's just go back to last week. We saw Savannah Marshall produce again another stunning stoppage victory, setting up that fight with Claressa Shields, rather. Just your thoughts on what type of statement Savannah sent to Claressa and what the fans will be in store for when that one is officially announced.
It was a pretty devastating knockout against a good, solid opponent who'd never been stopped. She was the current European champion, a former world champion, so she was a good fighter. She'd obviously boxed Claressa Shields before too. I think it was a statement, but also styles make fights, and also I think Claressa will be, it'll be a different Claressa we see when she fights Savannah than what we see in Cardiff. I thought she won every round in Cardiff. Do you know what I mean? But I didn't think she didn't look amazing. I thought out of the two performances, Savannah's was a lot more, was a much bigger statement. It was a lot more exciting. It was spectacular, all that type of thing. That said, Savannah is a much bigger puncher than Claressa. I think Claressa would admit that. That's a fact. But Claressa has only lost once, and that was to Savannah years ago. So you have to acknowledge that. And look, everyone has off nights, and it was an off night where she won every single round. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, look, Savannah looked brilliant and has looked brilliant, even the fight before that, and she's on another level now. I think Savannah, to where she has been performing, she's got a confidence, she's believing in herself, and her performances are reflecting that. But her and Claressa, styles make fights. Claressa's a better boxer, probably. Savannah the bigger puncher. So it's going to be an interesting clash of styles.
Which way do you kind of edge towards with that fight, Matt? Do you expect Savannah to eventually get to Claressa, and even if she maybe doesn't drop her, she doesn't kind of hurt her, she'll be able to break it down and slowly pick up the rounds herself? Or will Claressa's style prove to cause issues to Savannah, which maybe in the pro rank she hasn't had to deal with before?
Well, exactly that. I think it's hard. It's hard not to get swept with the hype of Savannah when she's knocking people out and looking $1 million. It's hard not to get swept with that. So on current form, you're as good as your last fight. I think everyone's swaying towards Savannah, but I'm aware that people. You can perform, you can be hot and cold, can't you? And some people box to the level of their opposition. And I think that Claressa, it'll be a different Claressa that we see against Savannah than we've probably seen when she was over in Cardiff. Not that she was bad in Cardiff, but she wasn't, it didn't, it was an underwhelming performance, I thought, for her. She got the job done, she won every round, but it was, she wasn't, I don't know, eye-catching, where Savannah's just looked $1 million in the last two fights. She's like, everyone's been talking about her. Everyone's raving about her. Like, she's knocking girls out, this proper, genuine power. And relaxed, not just power, good boxing skills, very relaxed. So she's got the hype with her at the minute. But Claressa's, her track record, her resume, you can't forget that.
Well, from that one, obviously, Florian Marku stopping Chris Jenkins in the 4th round of their fight. A lot of talk as to what next for him. Chris Congo is very determined to try and secure that fight. He said it'd be an easy night's work for him if those two met. What would be your thoughts, Florian versus Chris Congo?
Yeah, I think that's a fight, and I think it's a fight we should see next, because it's all right. Florian's a good talker, isn't he? And he's charismatic, and he's selling himself, and he's promoting himself. But the reality is, yeah, Chris Jenkins was doing okay, walked onto a good shot, and it was a good win for Florian. And he's undefeated. The draw he had, I thought he won, but he's performed at a level. Do you know what I mean? And Chris Congo, I think that's a fight that these are fights that we should be making. It's a real fight. Congo lost to McKinson, but McKinson, very good, very awkward as well. And I think Congo and Florian, I think that's a good fight. And it was like the Jenkins fight was good for Marco because you know where he's at. You know where he. All right, so former British champion coming off a win against Ndongo, and Florian deals with him. So that was a good win. But there's other guys that are on that level. I think Chris Congo being one of them. That again, if he does the same to Chris Congo, we think now then you're dealing with the British level guys. Maybe we're ready for the step up. But it's a good fight, and I think it's one that I think they will try and make.
Right, Frank, get your thoughts on a few other things, Matt. Tomorrow, I think it'll be about 2:00 from what I've seen. An old foe of yours, Gennady Golovkin, steps back in the ring against Ryota Murata. Just get your thoughts on what you expect to see in that fight.
Look, Golovkin is going to be first ballot Hall of Famer. He's probably one of the top 5 middleweights of all time. One of the best fighters of the last generation. Pound for pound, just devastating, great fighter, amateur and pro. And he's had an amazing career, but, time waits for no one. Father Time is undefeated. And, you wonder how much longer he can go on for. I don't, and the pandemic, probably happened at a bad time for an aging fighter, really, to lose a couple of years at that stage when you haven't really got years to be losing. That said, Murata, good fighter, nothing special. Golovkin could still have too much for him, but I think the day's coming. I don't know how much more Golovkin's got. He's 40 years old now, I think, and it's not just the pro career he's had; it's the training for all these fights. It's those hundreds of amateur fights, those training camps. It's your body biologically, you just get older, don't you? And your body stops producing certain hormones. Things get tougher. You need more recovery. And even when you take all that into account and you adjust and taper your training differently to factor in, to take those things into, factor those things in. Time is time. I think he probably wins this one, but I don't think there's loads left in Golovkin at that level that he's been performing at.
Golovkin actually happened to turn 40 today, Matt, and as you mentioned, Father Time waits for nobody. He's only fought once during the pandemic, which was on the day before Canelo Smith. Inactivity, age, when does that point, in your opinion, come when it does show in his performances, or do you think we've already seen it going back to maybe his most recent fight back in 2020?
I think he was slowly, if you're talking about leveling and then the peak, I think he's been slowly deteriorating. Like I said before, it's not dramatic. I don't think, he didn't get old overnight and he's gone from being a killer to terrible, shot to bits. That hasn't happened. But I think he's been declining slowly for years. I think for probably about 5 years. I think probably from before the first Canelo fight, he was starting to just dip down a little bit. And then you look at, that's 5 years ago, and you look at the fights, the two Canelo fights, the other hard fights he's had. It's all miles on the clock, isn't it? But look, a legend. He'll be an all-time great. He's a Hall of Fame, first ballot, top fighter. What's he got left? I don't know. We'll see. So I guess Saturday night or Saturday day, whatever here, will tell us a little bit more.
We know that Eddie Hearn said that the plan will be for Canelo and Golovkin to complete their trilogy in September, provided Triple G successful tomorrow. What would you expect to see if that one did go ahead? Again, I know it all comes down to how Golovkin looks tomorrow, but let's say he just comes through the fight and he produces a steady win, shall we say? Is it just kind of going to be one step too far now for Canelo when you look at the trajectory that Canelo's been on over the last few years in comparison to Golovkin, who hasn't been performing maybe at that same level he was previously?
Well, look, Canelo's in his peak, I would say. He's in his peak and probably has been for the last couple of years, and he's still there. I think he hasn't shown any signs of slipping at all. If anything, he's got better. So I would think that he beats Golovkin comfortably in a third fight. Whether he wins it wide on points, whether he stops him, I don't know. But I think it'll be a very decisive and conclusive Canelo win in the third one.
Away from that, Matt, obviously we're only a couple of weeks away now from Fury-Whyte. Still an ongoing silence on Dillion's behalf. As we've drawn ever nearer, Matt, you're still seeing these kind of legal disputes ongoing and what have you. What's been your thoughts as an outsider looking in?
Messy, disappointing, but not surprising. It's heavyweight boxing. From the mandatory position to the splits of how the bid would go. It's just disappointing that it's gone the way it's gone a little bit. Obviously, Dillian feels pretty, I guess, agree. He feels hard done by with the bid split, and then because of that, probably hasn't played ball with the promotion, and because of that, then they're thinking, okay, well, we're not gonna go out of our way to accommodate things that we would probably normally accommodate, that are just an unsaid thing that you do, like a courtesy. They just haven't. It's been tit for tat. I'm not going to say one side more than the other because I don't know the ins and outs, but it's none of my business. But the from the outside looking in, it's been tit for tat really, and it's a shame it hasn't had the promotion it probably should have had. But I do think it's going to catch fire these next couple of weeks. Now people are really, like, I just know from friendship groups and things, people are starting to talk about it a lot more.
When you look at it, Matt, obviously we saw in the third Deontay Wilder fight for Tyson, Deontay never really spoke to the media or during press conferences and what have you. If Dillian takes that route, do you think he's trying to get underneath the skin of Tyson, or do you think there's a genuine grievance there with regards to everything that we're hearing or finding out about through the press?
I think there's a genuine feeling of he didn't get what he felt he deserved in the split, and thought, a little bit probably throwing his dummy out the pram a little bit, saying, well, I'm not going to help the promotion then. I'm not going to push it. He probably wants them to lose money, I guess, But also, there might be, whether this is just a consequence of it or an added thing, it might be better for him in his mental preparation not to really get into it with Tyson Fury, because how are you going to beat someone like Tyson Fury when it comes to all the slagging and the bantering and the back and forth? You can't, can you? So remember Carl Froch and George Groves, the first fight, and then the second fight, because I think Froch realised he wasted too much energy and he let Groves get into his head, and he actually really disliked him and took it too personal by the time they got into the ring. And I think it affected his performance, because he just had such disdain for him that he had no respect. He couldn't stand him. And it affected his... They say that there's a famous saying, never hate your enemy, because it'll affect your judgment. It'll mean you don't want to give them any credit, do you? Because you can't stand to give them any credit, where really you should be giving them respect and credit, because you're going to fight them. So you want to know everything they're good at, so that you can make sure you're prepared for it. Where if you're trying to rubbish them off because you don't want to give them any credit because you can't stand them, it's going to affect. It could affect your performance. So I think the main reason was he felt pissed off that he didn't get the split of the bid that he felt he deserved. And I think actually it might actually do him. It it might not be the worst thing in the world for Dillian and his chances of winning the fight, actually not to really get into it with Tyson Fury.
When the fight comes around, Matt, what do you expect to see? I spoke to David Price yesterday, and David said he expects it to be a dirty fight because on both behalves. What do you expect to see?
I don't know really. I think you've got to favour Tyson Fury, the better boxer, But Dillian is dangerous. Like, it's definitely not a foregone conclusion. It's not a gimmick by any stretch. Like Tyson, we're assuming we see the Tyson that we've seen recently, that and he performs to the best of his ability. Then I think Tyson's, a pretty strong favourite. But if he underperforms for whatever reason, who knows? Dillian's dangerous. He can punch. He's strong, tough. He's awkward as well. Big, long jab on him deceivingly. So it's Tyson's got to turn up top of his game.
Matt, something which has brought kind of into a lot of, say, annoyance within the boxing world is seeing Jarrell Miller brought into the Tyson Fury camp. Obviously, Jarrell Miller's previously failed for a number of performance-enhancing drugs. Just get your thoughts on him bringing Jarrell in for sparring.
Well, look, it's sparring, isn't it? And if Tyson feels that's someone he can use to make him be better prepared for the fight, well, then that's up to Tyson. But I don't think any boxing commission in the world should sanction him to box. I don't think they can control or police who trains with who. Do you know what I mean? But like, for him to be licensed and to earn money prize fighting, I don't think he should be allowed, because he just shouldn't done. If you do, what's the point? What's all the drug testing about? If you're going to let someone like Jarrell Miller, who's failed, how many now? 2 or 3?
I think at the time he tested positive. Well, he obviously had the AJ period, and then he had periods after that as well. So I think 4 or 5 during his career that he's tested positive.
If that guy doesn't get a life ban, what are we doing? There's no point even talking. If that guy doesn't get a life ban, there's no point even talking about PEDs. You may as well just open the floodgates up for everyone to do whatever they want, because you're not. Where is the deterrence?
Matt, away from Jarrell, just get your thoughts on another big heavyweight fight which we expect to see soon. Usyk-AJ too. Obviously, wasn't sure whether Alexander would be coming out with what's going on in the Ukraine. Just your thoughts, though, with obviously everything that is going on back there. If you're in Alexander Usyk's shoes, will it be one he can use it for motivation and to try to kind of uplift the people of Ukraine, is what, again, David Price was saying to me yesterday? Or will it be difficult to switch off from thinking about what's going on back home if you're in Alexander's shoes? Just your thoughts when Usyk-AJ 2 comes around, your take on it.
Yeah, look, I've always thought it's not a good fight for AJ. Style-wise, he's a bad style for him. His attributes and his ones, it doesn't stack up good for AJ. It's not impossible. He's a former heavyweight champion, good fighter. He had his moments in the fight. Of course, he could win it, but I don't think his chances are great. That said, look, just looking at forget what was happening in Ukraine, I think Usyk could be better in the rematch. I think he's grown into the heavyweight division all the time. He hurt AJ, had him out on his feet at the end. He'll know he can hurt him again in this fight. AJ will know Usyk can hurt him. I think it's not a good matchup. I don't think style-wise for AJ. That said, we don't know what effect the situation in the Ukraine is going to have on Usyk. Like, you're training for whether it's 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, to maintain focus and to not have your focus shifted with everything that's going on in Ukraine, that'll be nearly impossible. I don't care how professional or focused you try to be. Plus, we don't know, is it going to get worse? Has he got family members, friends? How's it affecting them? Are they, really involved? Or, you know what I mean? We don't know, do we? How that's going to go for him, or what sort of impact negative impact that's going to have on him and on his preparation. But you'd imagine it's going to have some, isn't it?
Matt, away from Usyk-AJ to just get your thoughts on a couple of fights. Joyce Parker seems to be in the works. What will be your thoughts if that one gets over the line and we see the pair of them share the ring?
Joe Joyce and Josie Parker.
Yeah.
I think good fight. Good fight. I think Josie Parker's obviously more experienced as a professional and everything, but you know, Joe Joyce, he stayed amateur a long time. He had a lot of WSB fights, so you got to move quick with a guy like that, and he's capable, good fighter. You know, strong as like a bear, isn't he? Looks a bit slow and cumbersome and predictable, but I think he's one of those guys that he's very easy to underestimate. He's got good timing. You can imagine he's one of those guys. You watch him on the outside the ring. You think, oh, I'll do this when I'm in there, and I'll do that. But when you're in there, it's completely different. You're under a lot more pressure. He closes the distance better than you think. He might not have great hand speed, but he's got good timing. So even though the jab might seem slow, he hits you, and it's like, you know, and he's got a solid chin, physically strong. That could be a tough fight for Josie Parker. Yeah, I could see Joyce winning that, to be honest.
And then the final one, we saw Callum Sauerland's comments earlier this week that a weight had been agreed for, or overcome rather, for a potential fight between Cal Brook and Chris Eubank Jr. Just get your thoughts. Is that the right move for Cal to be looking to move up in weight once again to face somebody like Jr.? Or again, the kind of Ben fight was being mentioned. Would that have been maybe a bit more of a more sensible fight, if that's the right word to use?
I wouldn't do either if I was Cal Brook. If I was Cal Brook, I'd fight Josh Taylor. You know, if you're Cal Brook, you're a former world champion. You know, you lost your title to Errol Spence in a good fight. You know, you went up to middleweight and fought the man at the time, Golovkin. You know, and you know, whatever, you gave a lot of weight. You took the opportunity. You rolled the dice. Didn't quite work out. Came back down. Then to welterweight. Fought your mandatory challenger, Errol Spence, who's gone on and established himself as one of the pound-for-pound fighters. So, from Cal's point of view, I wouldn't go down to that level with either of them. I would stay where he is, and I'd fight Josh Taylor. Let Josh Taylor come up because he said he's going to move up in weight. He's an undisputed, undefeated world champion. That's your Cal Brook. That's your level, world championship level. Let Cal Brook come up and have the physical advantage. Why would you give away a big physical disadvantage to Eubank when you can have the physical advantage of Josh Taylor moving up? So, you know, it wouldn't be a title fight. You can do it at 149. That was the same as the Khan fight. And actually, you got Josh Taylor's got to prove himself as a welterweight. Now, Josh Taylor's going to move up and fight the likes of Terence Crawford and Errol Spence and become a welterweight world champion, two-weight world champion. Then he needs to be beating the likes of Cal Brook. So it makes sense. You know, it makes sense for Cal. He'll have this physical advantage. But Josh Taylor will be dipping his toe in the water, seeing how he is at welterweight against a guy who was brilliant in his peak, but he's past his best. And it'll be a big fight here because he'll be piggybacking off the profile of Cal Brook, assuming he wins. And from Cal's point of view, you know, that's he'll think after his last performance and the fact and taking into account Josh Taylor's last performance and the fact that he'll have the size advantage. You know, if I was Cal, I think, you know, that it stacks up better for him. It stacks up better for Cal to do that fight. So, yeah, if I was Cal Brook, I wouldn't do the Conor Ben fight. I wouldn't do the Chris Eubank fight. I'd do the Josh Taylor fight. You're world class, you know, former world champion. He's a current undisputed champion moving up. That's the fight for Cal Brook.
Right, Matt, we'll leave that there now. Leave you to enjoy the rest of your Friday and, of course, your weekend ahead. I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for speaking to me in Boxing Social.
Cheers, Andy.